Welcome to Podcast Circle. I'm the creator and host, Alex Hitt. On each episode of Podcast Circle, we bring together a group of entrepreneurs and business owners to have roundtable discussions about our experiences building and running businesses today. While I host and moderate the conversation, the views and opinions expressed by each guest are their own. I do not endorse any products, services, or advice shared on the podcast unless explicitly stated. With that said, let's jump into our introduction so you know who has joined us today. Burt Levy, would you please start us off?
Levy, KumoPartners.com, Chicago, Illinois.
Roelf Woldring, the Right Talent CA.
The topic of discussion today is, who's the best leader you've ever had and why were they the best leader? Burt Levy, would you please start us off?
Sure. I have been incredibly blessed in my career where I have benefited from some incredible, amazing leaders. Conversely, I've also seen some awful ones. And when you see the awful ones, you truly get to appreciate how great the great ones really are. But the one that stands out and probably had the most influence on my career is a gentleman named Ken DiPaolo. He was the associate publisher of the Sun-Times. And if I didn't mention it before, I am a recovering media professional. I spent 22 years at the Sun-Times. And what made Ken so unique as a leader was he knew that leadership was a responsibility, not a rank. He knew that the way you treat your employees profoundly affects their whole experience at the company. And when you treat people really good, they're not going to leave just for a little more money, because that's how you build a culture. And he really built a phenomenal culture. He understood that as a corporate leader, you have the ability to help change the world by the way you lead your team. And what I mean by that is he made sure that everyone went home at night. For anybody that worked underneath him, they felt respected, admired, and most of all valued for their contribution at work that day. And when you can go home feeling like that, you engage with your family, you're present with your family, you're not only home physically, but you're home emotionally. And he led by example. We had the term at the Sun-Times called coward management. Coward management is those people that ask you to do stuff that they would never do nor are capable of doing. And he never asked you to do anything he wouldn't do or hasn't done himself. And the best thing is that he led by great example. And that's what you want in a leader, is somebody who sets a great example. And then probably his greatest quality was that he was an empathetic listener. He listened from a standpoint of empathy, and he took true empathy in a lot of his decision making. So many leaders today believe that leading by fear and intimidation is a great strategy, and all you're going to do is drive people out. And usually when you see companies that have a 40% turnover, it's because they lead by fear and intimidation. He was just a great leader because of those many qualities, and it was a joy to work for somebody like that, because every day you knew what you were going to get. He was very consistent in his behavior, and if he had a bad day, we all have them, he didn't show it, because that's what leaders do. They put on that good face and they take a lot of heat for you. And he always defended his people. And it was a joy to work for him. I wouldn't be where I am today without him.
So the chap who was probably the best leader in my career was actually a professor called Hedley Dimmick. Hedley, as well as being a regular professor, ran an outside thing called the Institute for Family Relation and Organizational Change. And the reason Hedley was a good leader is because I remember him so clearly in one of our sessions saying, leadership is about behavior, not about opinions, not about personality. If you can't behave in certain ways, you can't lead, because what other people see is your behavior. And the other thing that Hedley was not afraid to do as a leader is confront you personally when there was a great deal at stake. I was on a counseling psychology path when Hedley sat me down one day and said, you know what? You're passionate about work, not about the kinds of problems people have in the counseling case room. Stop thinking that that's your career path and get back to what you're passionate about. And it shook me, but he was prepared to do that kind of stuff. The last thing that Hedley taught me was that leadership is about the psychology of respect. And the psychology of respect in the workplace is as complicated as the psychology that people engage in intimate relationships. It has depths and layers, and one of the things that he challenged me to do was to work well with people that I did not like and would never spend time with socially, but we still had a professional responsibility to deliver stuff of value to the people we're working with. And that changed my whole perspective on leadership, on what I did. And the reason that the man was so impactful is he didn't just talk it. He never talked anything that he didn't walk. In running the Institute, he walked all of these things. He was a living model of the things that he was talking about. And I've never met another leader who didn't have a set of opinions about what it is to be a leadership, which didn't always align with how that person, he or she behaved. So the huge influence on my life, totally changed my career and totally changed my perspective on leadership and deeply influenced the way that I led myself.
Well, really great points there. Some things that I kind of connected with was a great leader is an empathetic listener. They're not ruling with an iron fist. They're not ruling through fear. They're actually listening and leading, like Roelf said, through example. They're a living model of the behavior that they want to see in the employees or the people that they're leading. One of the big leaders right now, I don't know if you guys are seeing this, is Deion Sanders, right? And how he's leading a team and his style of leadership. And I look up to that and what he's doing. And he's really bringing in a different type of leadership that I don't think we've maybe seen in a while. This kind of a strong-armed approach, but he is living up to that standard himself, right? He holds himself to an incredibly high standard, has his entire career, and he's educating people from a place of experience on what it takes to get where they want to go. I think that's a public example of leadership in the modern day that I think is effective and it's connecting with people.
Well, one of Headley's points was there's an awful lot of prescriptive stuff around leadership. And there's what he used to call the Fortune 500 theory of leadership, the kinds of leadership that gets social media and even industry press. But his point always was that if you can't learn how to behave the way those people behave, and if a leadership training program doesn't focus in on what looks like the simple stuff, but is in fact the very complicated stuff. Headley's point was, so how do you teach somebody to do that? As opposed to telling them, you must listen actively to be a great leader. That's easy. Actually teaching someone to go from being a non-active listener to an active listener takes a set of skills. And I think great leaders have that ability to mentor and to teach, not just act as prescriptive models of leadership.
The corporate world is so funny when it comes to leadership. It's like in the military, we give medals of honor to people who sacrifice themselves so others gain. In the business world, we give bonuses to executives who sacrifice others so they gain. And that's something, a concept that I never truly understand. But I think that our academic institutions are part of the problem because our academic institutions teach technical skills, not human skills. They teach you technical skills to get a job, like accounting, management, statistics, history, debate, speech, but we don't teach human skills. We teach how to talk, but we don't teach how to listen. And listening is one of the biggest, a critical leadership skill and one of the most powerful acts of caring. We don't provide education on human skills so people can live a life of meaning and purpose. Our educational system is built around the technical skills and then built around money. And they teach you the technical skills to go get a job and make money. We have talk shows, but we don't have listen shows. And when you can have a great leader that's a great listener that makes people feel that their voice is always being heard, it just does so much more for your organization. And again, the greatest act of charity is not by the checks we write, but by the way we treat our people. And I think leaders need to understand that everyone wants to do better. So you've got to trust your people. And leaders are everywhere in your organization. And find them. And people achieve good things, big and small, every day. Celebrate them. Some employees wish things were different. Listen to them. Everybody matters. And you need to show them. And the leaders that understand that everybody matters in their organization, I think is a big, big, big component of being a great leader.
One of the things I learned turning around an organization is my task as a leader was to make myself irrelevant. If I couldn't build a management team that could take over my role as a turnaround leader, I wasn't doing my job. And that meant that I constantly had to be empowering people and giving them the skills and the success experiences, which not only built their confidence, because many of them were in underperforming organizations. We don't see that concept of leadership. When we look at the Fortune 500 theory of leadership, we lionize those people, even the bad leaders, one of whom has recently made a great name for himself by taking over a social media company. We don't look at leadership as being something which in many cases means empowering others so that the leader becomes irrelevant.
The other interesting thing about leadership, especially corporate leadership, is that if you pulled aside most corporate leaders and asked them what's his biggest concern in running a business, they would tell you probably the rising costs of medical insurance, except most of them are the cause of it by placing profit over the people and the stress that goes along with it. What I say in business is what no business school in the country will teach in terms of your priorities. I say your priorities should be your people, your customer, and then your profits. Harvard, Wharton, Northwestern, University of Chicago, they will tell you that your priorities should be your profits, your customers, and then your people. But if you take care of your people are going to take care of your customers, and your business is going to win big time. It's funny, just in the U.S., exposure to workplace stress is probably costing about 120,000 lives a year. And again, because leaders care more for the financial results and economic gain, not people. Money, power, and position define success in many organizations, not people. And I think that equation needs to be flipped.
Let me build on something Burt said. Our business schools don't really understand what it is to be in business. I went back to what I call PhD kindergarten after working for 20 years, and I discovered that most of the people who were educating me, including the ones educating me about leadership, had never worked, had never done anything other than gone through BCom, MBA, PhD in a business school, had no real sense of what it is, had no accountability for the way they treated their students, even when there were student surveys. So I'm not surprised by the fact that business schools are the worst places in the world to help people become more capable leaders. You can't teach what you don't experience. And most of the people in business schools experience technical skills and technical consulting. That's why they teach it. That's what I think is the root cause of the things that Burt has talked about in terms of our education system having undermined our whole understanding of what leadership is in the corporate world.
I saw a statistic that said that 74% of employees say work is a leading cause of stress, and 88%, or about 100 million, go home not feeling valued for what they do. And from the Center of Disease Control, they said that your immediate supervisor is more important to you than your primary care physician, because he determines the amount of stress you have in your life and what he sends you home with. Listen, most people leave a job for two reasons. They either hate their boss or they got better benefits. And if you build a culture, a great culture, people will stay and work for less money rather than make more money and go to a worse culture. I hope this has been helpful. This has been great. I love the conversation.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, I thought the conversation was great. I really appreciate you guys sharing your experience and your knowledge around the subject. You guys are great leaders yourself, so I think you guys speak from a place of not only knowledge, but also experience. So I really appreciate that. But for everybody else, that's a wrap. Thank you for all of our guests for sharing their insights today. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening, and also head over to my website, alexhitt.com, to find additional resources, to attend upcoming online events, and to be the next guest on Podcast Circle.